So Joe Rogan had Matt Walsh on his podcast, and they had a debate that got pretty heated over the issue of gay marriage. So we're going to watch this, we're going to break it down. But let me say first up front a couple things about Matt Walsh. Matt Walsh is a massive extremist. I don't know if Joe knows that. Maybe he didn't know before and knows it now. Maybe he didn't think he was an extremist before and thinks he's still not an extremist now. But Matt Walsh, his position on trans issues is it should be the transition surgery, medical intervention should be banned even for adults. This is something he openly said on Twitter. So in other words, I'm against freedom, I'm against liberty, I'm against personal choice, and apparently he doesn't think gender dysphoria is a real thing. Okay, so look, he's flat out, he's an extremist. He did that, movie like, What is a Woman or whatever to try to like own the libs and say, see, boys are boys and girls are girls, bro, fucking idiots. You don't understand that, bro? You don't understand that, bro? Boys are girls are girls, bro. Boys are girls are girls, bro. It's like, wow, you're fucking super intellectual over there, huh? Again, he's against transitioning even for adults. I find that position absolutely astonishing. But anyway, so I didn't watch the whole podcast with Rogan and Walsh. To be honest, I don't want to see it. I don't want to see them going back and forth on trans issues where I'm sitting there and steam is coming out of my ears because I feel like they're just wrong about stuff. It would probably trigger the fuck out of me if I watch that. Obviously, Joe and I, especially recently, there's been more and more disagreement in terms of his political direction because he seems to really like DeSantis. And, my stance on that is DeSantis is against a lot of the things Joe claims he's in favor of. Like DeSantis is not in favor of legalizing marijuana. He's not. DeSantis is not in favor of raising the minimum wage. DeSantis has cracked down on free speech and free protest. He's just, the only issue that, seemed to dominate Rogan's mind is this issue of like lockdowns, and he kept Florida open. And so on that alone, he seems to think like, I like him. And then I also think just vibes. I think Joe, in some ways, he's a vibes guy and he gets good vibes from DeSantis. And so, but again, if you supported Bernie as Joe did, to support DeSantis is like politically, totally ideologically incoherent, right? And so had some big disagreements with him recently, but it's good to see that there was at least a debate. At least he debated him on gay marriage. I wish Joe also kind of debated Walsh on trans issues because he's an extremist. Matt Walsh is an extremist on trans issues. He didn't do that, I don't think. I'm not going to watch the whole podcast because I want to maintain my sanity. But let's go listen to the back and forth on gay marriage.
The Joe Rogan experience.
I think of marriage is a certain thing, which is the context for procreation, for the building of the nuclear family.
What about people that get married that don't have kids? Are you opposed to that? What if they get married, they decide, you know what, we don't need kids, I'm going to get fixed. You get your tubes tied, let's travel the world.
Well, what do you mean am I opposed to it? I mean, I think that every married couple should be open to life.
But what if they don't want to? Are you opposed to them being married? If marriage is only for procreation and to bond a family together, what about people that are deeply in love that never want to have children?
I don't think it's not only procreation, but that is one of the fundamental definitional aspects of it. Of course, there's more to marriage just than that.
And what about people that are infertile? They fall in love and they realize that they can't have babies and they don't really necessarily want to adopt. Is that okay for them to be married? Because then by definition, the marriage falls into a completely different thing because then it's a bond of love. It's a union of love.
Sure. I mean, that doesn't change the nature of marriage, though. It's a little bit like I say that what's the definition of a woman? Well, a woman is someone who by her nature can conceive children in her womb and bear children. And then the response is always, well, what about women who are infertile? Does that destroy your definition of woman? And it doesn't, because it's still a woman's nature to bear children. Not every woman will, and there will be disease and infertility and old age and all these things.
But so in other words, he's saying the point that destroys my point, I'm just going to assert it doesn't destroy my point. Like that's the argument he's making. It's like, well, being fertile is in the nature of being a woman. Well, what about a woman who's infertile? Well, being fertile is in the nature of being a woman. But your point was just rebutted. You have to adjust. You can't just like reassert your original point. Okay.
Things that will preclude that, but it's still of her nature to do so. And I would say the same thing for marriage. I mean, it is natural in a marriage for procreation to occur. It's not always going to happen in reality, though. But that's still one of the natural functions of marriage. And married couples who can't conceive children, there are other ways to be parents, like adoption, for example.
If they want to. Right, but if people want to be married and don't want to ever have children, are you opposed to them being married?
Well, I'm not. I wouldn't advocate a law that would prevent it.
But would it change the definition of what their marriage is to you because they don't want to have a family? They just want to have a loving bond?
I think this would be a couple that is rejecting one of the fundamental aspects of marriage, and they should be open to life. I would hope that in the future they would be, but
isn't that just a personal choice? I mean, you can have a very fulfilling life if you just follow your pursuits and your dreams and your interests, and you find someone that shares those interests with you and you share time together. It's very fulfilling and love.
What Joe is realizing is Matt Walsh's position on this, as well as the other social conservatives and evangelical Christians who are anti-gay marriage, they're just against freedom and liberty. They just don't believe in freedom. They don't believe in liberty. They don't believe in people making their own choices to try to fulfill their happiness as best as they possibly can for themselves. And that, hey, people are different. Some people are going to want kids. Some people are not going to want kids. You could have just as fulfilling a life or more fulfilling a life if you don't have kids with people who do have kids. You know, this is like common sense to Joe, and he's sort of flabbergasted that anybody would disagree and try to have this rigid idea and impose it on everybody else about what marriage is. Gee, I wonder if that relates to the whole "what is a woman" argument that you know this guy would make. It's the same train of thought. It's the same thought process. The way this guy thinks about gay marriage is the same reason he wants to ban transition surgery even for adults.
Yeah, it's a personal choice, and that I'm not advocating for like a law that says that you if you're married you have to have X number of kids.
But then why are you opposed to two gay people doing that?
Well, because again, it's not about choice. It's about what this institution, marriage is an institution, and what is it, and what purpose does it serve? And I do not agree with tearing down or changing this definition, especially because the people who have changed the definition haven't come up with a new one. So they say, well, that's not what marriage is. So for thousands of years, we said marriage is the procreative union. And then...
Okay, but hold on. Marriage used to be crass and transactional and about, like, property. He makes it seem like, no, it's this way that I've described it, and that's it. He doesn't even get the nature of it correct. The other thing I don't like that he does is, as he's being very prescriptive, he pretends like he's just being descriptive. So he's like, this is just what marriage is. And it's like, well, it's kind of a social convention, and it's not like it just exists in the ether and we discovered it as is. It's humans created it. It is a social construct, whether you agree with it, disagree with it, whatever feelings you have on it. So he acts like I'm just being descriptive and saying this is what marriage is by its nature. But it's not descriptive. It's prescriptive, and he has very rigid ideas as to what the rules should be around marriage. And people don't agree with that. In fact, the majority of Americans don't agree with him. What's it at now? 60, 70% of the country is for gay marriage?
We had the other side who came along and said, well, it's not that. Okay, well then, like, what is it exactly? And I know you said, well, it's people who love each other. Two people love each other. Well, but then, why two people? Why do they have to love each other? All these kinds of questions. You get into what if they're in the same.
So it's like, the slippery slope argument is going to end in some like really absurd place. This is the argument that he's making effectively. And you heard he slipped in like a shot at polygamy in there. Like, why does it have to be two people? Now again, I would on that front I'd be like, yeah, why does it have to be two people? Now it's not my cup of tea. I don't need to have a harem. Is that what it's called, a harem? of women. Crystal and I are great as we are, right? But like, yeah, who cares? What's the problem? Why is that a problem? That doesn't affect you and your marriage. And this is a point that Rogan's going to hammer away on now.
Family. What if brothers and sisters want to marry? And I know every time that comes up, the advocates for gay marriage will say, well, that's a slippery slope argument. That's a fallacious. But it's actually not. It's like we're trying to get to what do you even think this institution is now, since you've rejected out what we were saying it was. And
yeah, but people don't agree with what you say it is and think it should be. And again, you're doing this Weasley trick of I'm just describing what marriage is. No, you bring a lot of baggage into that conversation. You have prescriptions. You're not just being descriptive.
I've never found a compelling definition. And any definition offered, it's like
it's that same like boys are boys and girls are girls. That's the same shit here. Marriage is marriage, as I see it, and my mommy told me it was this, so it's this.
Well, what's even the point then? Why do we even need this now?
I just don't see how a gay marriage in any way damages a straight marriage.
You don't see it because it doesn't, Joe. You're correct.
I don't see it at all. It doesn't make any sense to me. It just seems to me that people want to be... Look, if you wanted to look at logic, especially in our modern society, which is pretty fucked when it comes to relationships, it's somewhere in the neighborhood of 50% of all marriages end in divorce anyway. They don't make it. I don't know if anything would damage marriage and damage the institution of marriage is the option of divorce. I don't think gay people and gay people getting married in any way, shape, or form changes a bond that you have with your wife. It's just called marriage. It's a human invented thing. If we decide that gay people can get married too, I just don't see how it damages anything. I don't think it tears down the definition of marriage in any way. It just opens up the possibility that people who are gay won't be discriminated against.
Yeah, I don't think that a gay couple existing.
It's always great when Rogan's on your side and he makes an argument because he is the epitome of a normie in many ways. And so he makes these really normie arguments that, like, you're not going to talk him out of this one. There's two things you're never going to talk Rogan out of. Being pro-gay marriage and being pro-weed. Although, again, Joe, I love you, brother, but Ron DeSantis is anti-weed. He doesn't want to legalize weed. On that alone, you should drop his ass. I know you like him, but you shouldn't. He's against weed and he's against a higher minimum wage. I mean, those are game, set, match. Because Joe's in favor of a higher minimum wage, too. So I'm just, Anyway, I'm on a sidetrack now. You get the point.
Directly impacts, there's a gay couple and, wherever, and I'm with my wife in our house. Like, obviously, There's not. But I'm not talking about on the individual level. I'm talking about on the societal level.
Right.
I would agree that divorce, especially, this no-fault divorce, rampant divorce, I don't think it's as high as 50%. I know that's often quoted. I'm not sure where that comes from, but it is.
I've seen that number like everywhere.
It's high. It's too high. And
Chris Rock has a great joke about that. He said those are just the people with the courage to get out. It's like, how many cowards stay? But
it's also true that the advocates for what we call now traditional marriage, which I just call marriage, but the advocates for traditional marriage put themselves at a disadvantage by especially in the churches, like allowing this rampant divorce to occur.
Okay, so now you also want to, ban divorce? Or make divorce way harder? So here's another way in which Matt Walsh is against freedom. He's against adults making their own decisions that they think would make them the happiest. Again, look, just don't fucking pretend like you're the freedom guys. That's all I ask. You want to be super authoritarian? You want to micromanage everybody's social life? Clearly he does. Ban transition surgery for adults, ban gay marriage. Just don't pretend like I'm the freedom guy. No, say, I am a social conservative, and my beliefs are influenced in a very rigid way by evangelical Christianity. I am a theocrat. Just say that, and then look, we can have the honest disagreement, but unfortunately these guys so often pretend like they're pro-freedom, and then they're like, but I'm pro-freedom, but I don't like freedom, and I want to ban people being free.
And then you've already sort of given up on some. Marriage is supposed to be monogamous and permanent, as well as procreative. Well, you've given up monogamy and permanence, and so now it's not. That's two of the three legs gone, and so now this assault was waged on the procreative part of it, and it was difficult to withstand it because the institution had already been weakened. So I agree with you there.
But again, he thinks he's just being descriptive about marriage. Marriage is X, Y, and Z. It's like, no, you have prescriptions there that it's your definition. Your definition as influenced by theocracy and evangelical Christianity, and people don't agree with you. And if something is a social convention, if something is cultural, it's not in the nature category, it's in the nurture category. We can change it. We can change it and make it better.
But my answer to that is to try to reinforce what marriage is, not to just give up on it entirely.
So how would that work? Take away everybody who's already gay married, take it away. They're no longer married. Don't allow anybody from here on out to get gay married. Like, just, let's be honest about what you're calling for.
And I still think you're left with this question of, like, if marriage is not what I'm saying it is, then why do we even need it? What's the point? I mean, you're saying it's a man-made institution.
Yes.
But you're also, like, the way that you're presenting it, it's a totally meaningless institution. So they don't need it at all.
No, it's not meaningless. It's because it means something to the people that get married.
So it's just a subjective, symbolic thing. I mean, what?
Yeah.
So if you're
yeah, he says it like it's ridiculous. Are you saying it's just subjective and symbolic, bro? Not only is it those things, it is obviously those things. Matt Walsh. Here's his contribution to the national discourse, fundamentally. Boys are boys and girls are girls, bro. That's boys are boys and girls are girls, bro.
What it is, look, there's a massive responsibility when you're married and when you have children to keep your family together and you raise and keep everybody happy and healthy. And there's great reward to that.
Yeah.
But it doesn't always work out. It's people change. People are fucked up. It doesn't always work. And so I don't think it should be outlawed because 50% of the people fall apart. Just like I don't think it has any effect whatsoever on a straight couple if a gay couple decides that they want to make it official. And that's what it is to them. It gives them a feeling that they're accepted and appreciated and that they're not discriminated against because they happen to be homosexual.
So, well, what you're articulating to me is the damage that's done by gay marriage to the institution of marriage.
But how is it done? How is that in any way damaged straight people?
Because we are making the institution meaningless.
Because Matt Walsh is thinking now, God, Dave's dick looks tremendous. It looks so tasty. That was actually an old Joe Rogan joke, that people who are against gay marriage are secretly afraid that dicks are delicious. I mean, it does kind of feel like that, right? Like, bro, once you give people the option, nobody will even have kids anymore because everybody will be gay married. It's also the same sort of fear and hysteria and mania around trans issues. It's like, if you allow people to transition, you allow people to like be who they feel like they are, well, what if we have like 70% of the population becomes trans, bro? What then? There's like a weirdness at the core of their objections.
But it's not meaningless.
Well,
it's very meaningful to the people that have it.
Subjective, symbolic, and it's about your own personal feelings.
Isn't it though?
Well, no, I would say that it's not.
Well, if it's not
it's objective. Marriage is objective. What does that even mean? Marriage is not symbolic. And again, the procreation point, I think, is the dumbest of all of them, because there are so many scenarios in which people are married and they don't have kids. And they're not any less married than people who are married and have kids.
Objective, and it's not symbolic.
It codifies and protects and gives a name to a thing that actually exists, which are man, woman couples creating people.
Again, he thinks he's being descriptive, but he's being very prescriptive. It's the dirtiest trick in the book. Me, bro, I'm just describing things as they are, bro. Acting like, well, there's no further debate. There's no conversation. Acting like social convention is actually an objective natural phenomenon that's unchangeable. Well, clearly it is fucking changeable. We've already changed it.
Creating babies.
But not always.
Right, but that's still the nature of the union. So,
but what are the percentage of people today that are married that don't have children? I bet it's pretty high amongst heterosexuals.
Probably.
Is there something wrong with that?
I think there is something wrong with that. I think there is something wrong with...
I love that, like, just questions that even minimally prod people like Matt Walsh, like, their whole worldview falls apart. They can't defend it. Because really it just stems from, like, authoritarian thinking, conservative thinking in the sense that you embrace tradition like a baby embracing a blanket, right? There's not much at the core other than like, this is how it was, and so therefore it's how it should be, because that's what is natural and objective.
Getting married and saying, we're not gonna have any kids at all.
But why is there something wrong?
By the way, just one other point about the nature of this, man. Like, this kind of thinking permeates throughout their entire ideological worldview. Because take, for example, poverty and like income and wealth inequality. They look at that and they genuinely believe like, look, that's just the natural hierarchy of things. That's like how it's supposed to be, because that's how it is. So you see how that kind of thinking can get you in trouble? This idea of like things just are what they are. And in effect, he takes that next step, which is sort of unchangeable. And it probably would be a bad thing to change it. And that's how you get a system that's like deeply, deeply not meritocratic, but he acts like, no, it is a meritocracy. And like, so if you're doing poorly financially, if you're in poverty, like just look in the mirror, blame yourself, pull yourself up by your bootstraps. So there's no real critique of like systemic factors and tax rates and the redistribution of wealth and like union policy. It's just like, this is how it is. That's the mind virus of extreme conservatism. It's this idea that hierarchy is there for a reason, and it is, if anything, it's good, and you mess with the hierarchy at your own risk. And you could see how that thinking in so many ways is beyond absurd, that it actively prevents us from making progress, from going in a good direction and making more people happy and increasing freedom. It really is amazing to see.
Wrong with that, if someone's personal choice. Well, why is it wrong? The two people are like, I am deeply committed to work and I don't want to sacrifice any of my career and I don't want to ruin a kid because I'm constantly at the office, but that's where I get deep satisfaction and that's what I'm focused on. And the woman says, that's great because I don't want children either. I really am attached to my interests and my career and what I like to do. That's not damaging your relationship with your wife and your family. I certainly don't think of it as a threat to my marriage or my family.
Yeah, it is a personal choice.
Right, but shouldn't people be allowed to make those personal choices? Like, isn't that a fundamental aspect of what it means to be American, to have that freedom?
Well, but right now we're not talking about what people are allowed to do. I'm not saying
we're talking about marriage, gay marriage.
Okay, we were just discussing straight couples who choose not to have kids.
That's also a personal freedom issue, isn't it?
Yeah, and I'm not saying that straight couples should be legally required to have kids, but if you're asking...
But you're just saying it's wrong, and it's bad, and it's unnatural. So look, if you take that to its logical conclusion, you would be saying, hey, maybe there should be a law around that. Because clearly he wants to like get rid of the divorce laws or make it harder to get divorced. Clearly he's against gay marriage, right? So, hey man, rep it. Rep the position. Rep the position.
Me, do I think it's the right choice to just get married and choose not to have kids ever? I do not think that that's the right choice. It's their choice, but people can make choices that are wrong.
Great pitch. I'm sure voters are really can't wait to get into bed with you, man, ideologically. I'm with that guy. Everybody's wrong if they don't do exactly what I say and what I want, according to my own perspective and ideology.
And you can disagree.
How is it wrong if they have a fulfilling and wonderful life together?
Joe's not letting it go.
With that choice. If their thing is that they just want to have a bond between the two of them to just like take it to the next level, let everybody know, like, we are married. If I die, my money's going to go to Helen. And if Helen dies, I'm going to mourn her because she was my wife and now I'll be a widower. Like, to some people, that distinction gives them peace and security and makes them feel better about the relationship, that they're both so committed that they've legally signed documents that say that they're bound by law and under the eyes of God or whatever you believe in.
Yeah. They're able to make that choice, but I think you're still rejecting one of the purposes of marriage. And
see, he just asserts stuff. There's actually no argument. It's just asserting.
In the scenario that you just outlined, you're also deciding to live a really self-centered life. You're saying,
what if you're not? What if your work is very charitable? What if it benefits humanity in a deep way? What if you spend a lot of time doing, healthcare work and social work, and you're deeply committed to your community? It's not selfish at all. You're just dedicating your time to something other than raising new human beings.
I love this. Joe's bullshit meter is going off. When he can be good when he wants to be, man. There's his bullshit meter is going off, and look at his face. Look at his face. He is not buying what Matt Walsh is selling at all. He seems like apoplectic that Matt could believe the things that he's saying.
But you're dedicating your life to enhancing other human beings that are around you.
That's a hypothetical.
It is a hypothetical, but so is yours, right?
Yeah, but I think most of the people that choose, like, we're not going to have kids, and the rate of those rates are declining, and the age when people first have kids is also going up, and all that.
Yeah.
Most of the people that are making these choices, I don't think it's because they're involved in charity work. I do think that it is more the scenario you outlined in the first time around, which is just like, well, this is what I'm doing. I have my job, I don't want to give it up.
Yeah. But don't you think that people should have the freedom to live their life in that way? I think human beings vary widely, in a huge way. And I think there's some human beings that find a very fulfilling life just reading books and traveling and experiencing different things and seeing art and doing whatever the fuck they want to do. And they don't necessarily have to have kids to live a fulfilling life that way. And if they choose to do that with someone who they have a loving bond with and who they get married to, I don't think it's a bad thing that they don't want to have kids.
Well, I guess we have to, maybe we're running into a question of now you get to the real fundamental question.
I think it's a fundamental freedom thing.
Yeah, we're not disagreeing, I guess, on the freedom aspect of it, because, again, I'm not saying...
But you are. You are. You're backing off of it because he's pummeling you into the fucking ground, but you are disagreeing on that.
That you should be required to have kids.
But you're imposing your sensibilities and what you think is important in life to other people. But
Joe is not letting this go, man. I love seeing this.
Everybody has a different idea of what's important in life without hurting anyone. The thing is, like, what I'm saying is these people that are married, that don't have children, they're not harming anyone. They're not harming these unborn children that they never have. They're not harming anyone. And it doesn't affect...
And I'll actually go a step further. I think this is what Joe means to and believes, but, like, not only is it that they're not harming anyone, they're actually doing something that is right. It is correct because it is increasing their own happiness, fulfillment, joy, peace, etc. So, like, it's not just like freedom is good because it is the absence of authoritarian control. It's also freedom is good in the sense that you can try to maximize your own happiness, well-being, joy, fulfillment, meaning by exhausting the paths you want to go down. So it's not just like, oh, it's not harming anybody. It's like, actually, not only is it not harming anybody, it's actually a good thing. It's a good thing. All these people who were able to get gay married, right? Like, some of them, yeah, it might be like any other marriage, and there might be a divorce, and maybe it didn't work out because people are people, and they're messy, and it happens, right? But then there's going to be plenty of people who are gay married, and they're like way happier because they did that. So it was a good thing, not just they're not harming anybody. No, it's good. It's good. I'm happy that they should do that, right?
Your relationship with your family and your marriage at all.
Yeah, but I'm not imposing myself on them or harming them by answering a question about.
Yeah, he's not opposing himself. The guy who said transition surgery should be banned even for adults, he's not opposing himself on anybody. No.
About how I feel about their choices.
Right, but nor are gay people doing that to you.
I think the harm comes from, on a societal level, when we start breaking down these basic central institutions like
boys are boys and girls are girls, bro. Know what I'm saying? Did you know boys are boys and girls are girls, bro? Did you know that, bro?
The institution of the family and of marriage. That's where the harm comes from. And the more that people believe, the more that we build a society where it's believed that marriage is objectively meaningless, right? It's entirely subjective. It's just.
He didn't say it was objectively meaningless. He said it is subjective, and he's correct. It is literally subjective.
But it's just not making you feel better. The more that we build a society like that, I think that's where the harm comes in. The worse it is, and people are going to reject marriage, and that means more. Fewer kids are being born. Also, more kids are being born in a context where they don't have that stable family structure. So the harm definitely comes. It may not be this immediate, connect the dots thing, but
this is such bullshit because there have been studies that show children raised by gay parents actually do better. They do better than kids raised by straight couples, people in a straight marriage. So it's the opposite of what he's saying. It's the opposite of what he's saying.
And we can already see that.
All right, there you go. Look, like I said, I am not going to listen to the rest of the podcast because I'm sure I'll be pulling my hair out and cringing. And I'm sure that basically the entire time they talk about trans issues, I'll be like, oh. But I am happy Joe pushed back on this gay marriage point. Yeah, when you get into the specifics of an argument over gay marriage or we with Rogan, he's not going to back down from his correct position, the left position. And I feel like Joe's audience now, there's been polls that show they lean more conservative. And to have a conservative audience hear that, I think is good. And I think in the long run, it does a lot of positive. If you want to see me and Crystal Ball interview legends like Noam Chomsky, Cornel West, and more, subscribe to Crystal, Kyle, and Friends on Substack. $5 a month gets you the video version a day early. Remember, we take 0 ad dollars for this podcast. Or you can sign up on Substack for free and get the audio version a day later. Link in the video description box below.